fino alla morte e lotteremo sempre forte forte finché terremo il nostro sangue in cor, sempre inneggiando la patria nostra, noi tutti uniti difenderemo contro avversari e traditori che ad uno stermineremo. Allarmi, allarmi, allarmi o fascisti, lo scopo nostro tutti noi sappiamo, combattere con certezza di vittoria, e questo non sia mai sol per la gloria, ma per giusta ragion di libertà, i bolscevichi che combattiamo, noi saprem bene far dire guai, e al grido nostro quella canaglia dovrà tremare, dovrà tremare. Allarmi, allarmi, allarmi o fascisti, vittoria in ogni parte porteremo, perché il coraggio a noi non mancherà, e grideremo sempre forte forte, e sosterremo la nostra causa santa, in guardia amici, e in ogni evento, noi sempre pronti tutti saremo, finché la gloria di noi fascisti in tutta Italia trionferà. Finché la gloria di noi fascisti in tutta Italia trionferà. Finché la gloria di noi fascisti in tutta Italia trionferà.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the last episode of my Italian campaign. And well, I think as I spoiled it already, but in this episode, once again, by striking from the Caucasus, I led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so briefly, what happened is that first of all, I wanted to make sure that I had enough oil reserves to move such a large motorized army. And Iraq, I declared war on Iraq in early January, and within couple of weeks, or even less than 2 weeks, the Iraqi government simply capitulated and collapsed to the Italian one. And I had to, set some reinforcements, priorities, reassign some troops, deploy some garrisons to suppress as much enemy resistance as possible, as well as to develop the local infrastructures to make sure that supplies were flowing to my frontline troops. And then in February, I think it was the 3rd of February 1942, in the middle of the winter, while the mountains of the Caucasus were all covered in snow, I declared war on the Soviet Union. I mean, it was not a real declaration of war, it was just saying, okay, Germany, here I come, just give me some pasta, and then, we will do our best. And this time, the Soviet AI reacted really quickly and really well, even though, again, I had numerical superiority over the Caucasus Mountains, and I just smashed through the Soviet lines and then basically expanded myself in every direction. And once again, attacking from the Caucasus led to, I would say, a kind of panicking reaction amongst the Soviet AI, I would say, because Stalin, let's say, had to direct quite a lot of troops from the Eastern Front to the Caucasian Front. And as my advance proceeded, the Axis advance proceeded as well, as now in many parts of the fronts there were just no Soviet divisions holding the lines. And this, let's say, the advance into southern Russia led to one initial pocket that eventually failed, because as you may have just seen, I tried to encircle some Soviet divisions in the Kuban Peninsula, but they just fell back and retreated in good order across the Crimea. And to prevent any surprise from the Soviets, I deployed one single division, the 58th Infantry Division, in the Crimea, in the how is it called? I think yes, is the Taman Peninsula, just to guard the Kerch Strait. And having failed to close the pocket there, I decided that maybe it was time to launch a full-scale attack against the enemy troops. While I was getting ready in April, the Soviets had some, let's say, left some gaps open, but I didn't want to exploit them because I really wanted to make sure that my troops were ready. And in mid-May 1942, the offensive began, and immediately the Italian troops registered an incredible amount of successes, and my motorized troops just managed to overrun the retreating columns of the enemy divisions, and they just basically smashed through into the enemy territory, and they just kept advancing and advancing and advancing. We all know that we all know the geography of the Soviet Union, and we know that no matter from where you attack, whether it is from the south, as I just did, or from the west, as I will do with Germany, the front line becomes longer and longer and longer. And even though I recorded a lot of successes, I realized that I just didn't have enough divisions with which to, on one hand, hold the line, on the other hand, reinforce my flanks, on the other hand, keep pushing into the enemy territory. And this is why, as you may have seen, I set, let's say, a fallback line order for my first army, because my first army was just advancing deep into eastern Russia for just no reasons at all. They were just diluting their troops in a freaking useless region of the front that, for me, I just could not care about it. So I set the troops to the fallback line order to make sure that they were just standing there and doing nothing, while I focused with the Second Army on the, I call it the Italian Western Front into southern Russia. It's so bad. Well, let's call it the Moscow Front, while with the motorized army I decided to advance towards the Vologda front. And of course, once again, the let's say collapse of the Soviet lines led to a kind of chain reaction, which, as you may have just seen now, on one hand led to the collapse of, not collapse, but trapping of some Soviet divisions into Romania, and to some other Soviet divisions in the Crimean Peninsula. I was really happy to see that once again Japan honored their alliance with us by declaring war against the Soviet Union. And I must say that the capitulation of the port of Vladivostok was a real blow to the Soviet morale. And here I did something that I would have never expected to do. I was now being very optimistic that I decided to really uncover the eastern front of the Italian penetration by redeploying the Second Army on the northern front, and I concentrated my motorized army on the northern Axis advance of the future Moscow front. And somehow I think that the Soviet AI realized that, and the Soviet AI also deployed some troops along the new front of the Second Army. So basically, the whole Eastern Front was now deprived of troops. And it really was funny for me because it reminded me of the times of the Russian Civil War, in which there was no real front lines but just troops moving along convoys and railways. And wow, I was really shocked. But you know, my surprise was overcame by the Battle of Volodka, of those northern cities, and the Battle of Moscow. Um, Finally, when proudly for the first time I led the Italian troops into the Soviet capital. And after a fierce battle which lasted 3 days, mainly because the Soviets did not have that many troops in the capital, Moscow fell. And with the fall of Moscow, the Soviet Union capitulated once again. I hope you enjoy this series, guys, and stay tuned for the next one.